Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Ben Blau once again, and we're here for part 2 in our 3-part mini-series on the use of sockets in Unreal Engine 5. If you haven't watched the first episode, I highly recommend doing so. It's very, very brief, and I think it's roughly around 14 minutes. In that episode, the first episode, we did all of our work inside of the default third-person template. And in fact, that's what I started with when I built out this environment. And you can see this is just a placeholder environment just so that it would look nice. And I did, in fact, set up a character. But the fact that I set up a character should not have any bearing on the type of work that we're going to be doing today. So let me start by just showing off a little bit about the character. Now, this character is a premium asset that I purchased. And the animations did not come with this character. They were retargeted, but that's fine. And if you don't know how to retarget animations, that's perfectly all right. Right now, this character in this state can walk. The character can run. The character can jump. We can see that from any perspective. I can also press a button, and I can have this character withdraw what will eventually be a sword-like object or a dagger, a blade of some kind that is mounted on her left hip. So if I press F, you'll see that happen. Okay? And notice that her posture is also changed. Now she's got hold of that weapon. And if I go into my walk cycle, notice that it remains in that position, and my run cycle. Furthermore, I've implemented some attacks. Some of these attacks involve just the sword. Some of them involve other parts of the body, and I did that just for variety. Okay, and I can always add more montages. Oh, I like that one especially. And what we have to make sure of is that once we set up the sockets, that they are attaching to the appropriate parts of the model at the correct time. And if I press F once again, you can see that the invisible weapon is resheathed, and now Aridel is back to her normal state. So once again, this is just normal. Running, jumping, wandering around. Now she encounters an enemy, so she gets ready to fight. She withdraws her blade. She can walk, she can run, she could jump, and she can attack. Okay? Eventually I'll add some audio to this, but that's a heck of a lot of fun. All right, so let me show you a little bit about how I've set up the character blueprint first. One thing that's important is that I had to get access to the animation blueprint that I made for this character. And I did have to customize the animation blueprint in certain ways because, remember, there is one state, so to speak, that is Aridel in the wandering state, and another state where Aridel is in the combat state. So this is that animation blueprint. We can start in the event graph, I suppose, if you want to see that. There's nothing special going on in the event graph. Most of the action is taking place here in the anim graph. And in the locomotion state machine, what I did is I used, in the idle state, 2 animations that I retargeted onto Aridel. And one of them is just a normal idle that came with an animation pack that I own. But I also have this idle combat sequence. And this is driven by a Boolean variable that I had to add to this animation blueprint called isFighting. Now, isFighting has a default value of false. So the false pose is what's going to play by default. That's just the regular idle that I have assigned to the character. But once this is set true, it's going to switch to the combat idle. And I've done that in other states as well. For example, in the locomotion state, I've got this walk-run blend space. But now I've got two of them. I've got the same Boolean condition, whether or not the character is fighting. And if the character is fighting, then it's going to switch to this blend space that I had to make by hand. And if it's not fighting, then I'm using this blend space. And remember that this is the ordinary blend space and is also determined by whether or not the character is fighting at the moment. In the character blueprint, I gain access to the animation blueprint right here off of begin play. I let this do whatever it wants to do, and then at the very end of the event begin play, I used this node. I searched for it, and you can just right-click in a disembodied area and search for get anim instance, and you will find that you want to use this one, the one that's associated with the mesh. And once you click that, it will probably come in just like this, but if not, this refers to the skeletal mesh that is in your components panel. So if you need to, you could always just drag that in and connect it to the target pin. And I may or may not have needed to do that. I don't recall at the moment. So once I've cast from get anim sequence to the animation blueprint in question, in this case it's called ABP underscore Aerodel, right? This is my custom animation blueprint. I simply promoted that to a variable and let the setter set it. And now I've got a variable called as ABP Aerodel, and I'm going to use that elsewhere in this event graph. So this is mostly accomplished using a temporary prototyping input, and I chose the keyboard key F for this because F to me stands for fighting, at least in this context. And I've followed that with a flip-flop so that every time I press F, well, it's going to start with the execution output A, and if I press F again, then it's going to use the execution output B. So the first thing that I'm doing, remember that is fighting is false by default. And if I neglected to mention this, I have a matching variable here in the character blueprint, and it is exactly named the same thing in the animation blueprint. Technically, they're two different variables, but they have the same name, which is fine with me because that makes sense. So when I press F for the first time, then this is where I'm setting is fighting is true in the character blueprint and in the animation blueprint. But when you're setting it in the animation blueprint, you must do so from the asBP Aerodel variable. And that's the variable that we promoted way up here. Okay, that's how we got access to it. So I had to pull off of there and choose set is fighting. And that's where it is. That's where I found it. And just keep in mind that it's not the same is fighting as these. These exist in the character blueprint, but these exist inside of the animation blueprint. Do notice that because both of them started false, I don't want Aerodel to be in her fighting state right off the bat. The first thing that I do is I set it to true in the character blueprint and also in the animation blueprint. And once that happens, I am using the play montage node. This is a little bit different from play anim montage because you have to plug in the skeletal mesh component. And again, that's just the character mesh. So you can drag it into the graph and plug that into the target pin. But it may, I don't think it does that automatically. So you just look for play montage. And I don't think that it comes with, no. So you're going to have to grab the mesh component like this if you haven't used this particular node before, and just do that. Of course, you're going to have to specify what montage you want to play. So I downloaded some animation packs that had to do with sword fighting, and I was able to locate one that worked well for sheathing and one that worked well for unsheathing. So as soon as I enter the fighting state, these variables are set, and then a montage is played of Aerodel removing the weapon from her belt. So we'll compile and save, and it's this montage. So I can even browse to it using the magnifier tool. And if I double click it, you can see this is the montage. I want to make sure that I attach the blade to the appropriate socket. Now, I still have yet to create these sockets for this skeleton, but it's handy to be able to create what are known as montage notifies to make that happen. So since this is the drawing of the weapon, I'm going to pause the animation and try to determine exactly where would be the right time to attach that to the socket. There's already a notifies track here, and I should be able to right-click on the line. Let me see. I'm sorry. I have got two tracks here, it looks like. This one, I think, was an error that I made earlier. So on Notify Track 1, I'm going to right-click, Add Notify. And what you want in this case is called a montage notify. This is a little bit different from a skeleton notify, but it will serve a similar purpose. So we're going to create that montage notify, and if we want to, we can also rename it. And in order to rename it, what you want to do is have it highlighted and go to the Details panel, and you can rename the notify something like Unsheath. I'm not sure if there's an E at the end of that or not, so forgive me if I've misspelled it. Okay, so now we know that it is at this point in the montage that we are going to want to add the weapon, which we have yet to create, but it's going to be at that moment that it attaches to the socket that we put on the skeleton hand. And we have another montage, which is the opposite, okay? And it's this one, where the weapon gets put away. So let's pause the animation and figure out where we want to put that notify. I think maybe right about there. So I'll right-click on the notify track, add notify, montage notify, and I'll select the notify and make sure I'm in the details panel once again. And I might call this resheath. Okay, and let's see how good my memory will last throughout this. I'm going to do a quick save all in case I've overlooked anything. Okay, so now is the time that we actually have to create the sockets themselves. So to do that, one thing that you can do is go to the viewport and locate the skeletal mesh asset that is representative of your character. So I can do that just by either using the magnifier tool or double clicking. So let's use the magnifier tool. And you can see that there's a couple of different versions of this skeletal mesh. And I use the one called, there's one called Full. And that one I think has the most gear and is the most interesting looking. But they all share the same skeleton right here, skeleton elf druid Aradel, and let's not forget that sockets go on the skeleton. Okay, so let's open up the skeleton and we'll look at it here. It is helpful when we're adding these sockets to have a preview animation playing. Let's see if I can find the one. Let's see, idle to idle. That's this. That's when she's putting it away. Okay. And I can pause this animation, right down here. And we can determine where that socket is going to be ideally positioned. Right. So she puts the weapon away right about there. So I'm going to place on the pelvis. We're going to select the pelvis, and we're going to right-click and add a socket, like so. And with that socket highlighted, we are going to play with the transform. But before we play with the transform, I want to add a preview asset. So I'm going to leave this tab open and show you what I'll be using. Here in my content browser, I downloaded a free fantasy sword pack, and I'm sure you can find this on Fab. And under geometries, we've got some static meshes. And I settled on this one as being my favorite, SM_sword_026. So all I really have to remember is 026. So going back here to the skeleton, what I want to add to the socket is to add a preview mesh. So add preview asset. This is what I need, excuse me. I had to move my meeting controls out of the way for that. Pelvis socket, add preview asset. Let's see if I can find it this way, 026. Yeah, there it is. Now you can see that that orientation is completely wrong for where we would want it to be. So I'm going to have to do some manipulation of this. And remember, we are manipulating the transform properties of the socket that the preview mesh is connected to. So I like to try to get this as right as I possibly can at this stage. We can always edit it further in the blueprint, the character blueprint that is, but I like to get this in the hand, or at least in the right part of the belt in this case, so that when it is retrieved, it looks correct. And you can also adjust the scale of this, if necessary. So let's rotate that. And I want to make this look like Aridel is wearing this. So slow down my camera speed because I'm spazzing out a little bit there. And we'll use our translation tool and get it closer to the body. Maybe something like this. Like so. And I do want the blade to be grabbed by the, whatever this part is called. Is that the scabbard? Not the actual blade. So let's move this down a little bit. So when Aridel grabs it, it's not going to slice Aridel's hand open. Okay. So I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to get the rotation the way that I want it. By the way, I usually like to turn off snapping when I'm doing this. It just gives me a little bit better control over the granularity of this. And look at it obviously from multiple angles. Okay. That into the hand, so that when it's grabbed, it looks like it's in the correct orientation. And if this is not absolutely perfect, remember, we can add additional offsets in the character blueprint. So if I'm at a different part of the animation, does it look like this sword is being worn? I don't think so. So I'm going to, again, get that socket, the socket that this is attached to, and just move it closer to the body. Something like that. Okay? So it looks like it's perhaps being worn around the waist. All right, so I can save this for this particular socket. And I need another socket that's going to be in the right hand of the character where that weapon is going to be added. So we're going to go, therefore, to hand right. Okay, so here we'll add a socket. And again, once again, that is to right-click. And we're going to add a socket. And we can rename the socket as we wish. I'm going to call it hand_sword_socket. I don't think I named the previous one. I better check that. Pelvis socket. I think I should be more explicit about that. let's say sword underscore belt underscore socket, like that. Okay, so now we've got one for the right hand as well. So let's add our preview asset, 026. And I don't want the damaged one. I like the pristine one. Okay, so this is still not exactly where we would want it when it attaches. So we're going to play with it a little bit and get it into the hand carefully with good rotation and good translation and good and just make sure that it looks like it's really being held. So translation tool, bring it maybe up a little bit more into the hand. I do want to look and make sure that it's not clipping anywhere with the mesh. So I like to look at this from multiple angles. Maybe bring it down here a little bit. And is that clipping with the index finger? Maybe just a little bit. And nowhere else, I don't think. All right, so we might decide that I want to rotate this a little bit farther north. So I think maybe that could possibly be a little bit better. It's still looking good over here. And we're clipping with the thumb a little bit, I think. Oh, actually, we were not. I misjudged what I saw. So continue some subtle adjustments here. When you watch other tutorials on this, by the way, usually they don't take too much time doing it at this stage, but I like to. So we've got our sockets that we need on this skeleton. And by the way, if you ever want to look at the bones, you can always go character. You can go to bones and all hierarchy, and you can see exactly where those bones are if you want to. So let's save that asset. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the character blueprint for Aridel. And we're going to add this static mesh as a component, but as a child of the skeletal mesh that is the character mesh. So I'll go ahead and hit add. Now notice that because I want it to be a child of this, I've got this highlighted first. So I'm going to add a static mesh, and it still remembers the one that I had last selected. So this is going to be exactly the right one. We'll put it into the viewport, and you can see it's obviously not in the right location because we haven't specified the parent socket for it yet. So if I open up this little search drop-down, remember we had the belt socket. That's where it's going to start out. And let's look at it, how it appears here, and it's following the mesh. And I want to make sure that it's not impaling Aridel's arm. At least not too much. What I might do is offset that just a little bit more or rotate it a little bit more. Now, right now the character is animating, so if I go to the mesh, I can take it out of its animation blueprint for just a second. And let's see if I can rotate this a little bit better so that the arm is less likely to clip into it. Something like that. Maybe a little bit farther back. Okay, and we'll put her back into her animation blueprint and see how that went. So going back to our character mesh, use animation blueprint, and that is kind of okay. All right, at least the weapon's attached. It may not be perfect, but it's still going to work. You can you can play with that as much as you like. So we now have this static mesh component in this blueprint, and we can use attach component to component the same way that we did before. But we're going to do that using events that come from the notifies that we just placed inside of those animation montages. And that's where the magic happens. So let's go back to the event graph. And here on play montage, what we want to do is on notify begin, we are going to attach component to component. Okay, so we want to attach the sword and the sword is the target. Okay, that is our static mesh. And we also want to specify the parent, and the parent of the sword you can see is the skeletal mesh for the character. That's going to be our parent. And then the socket name, well, we just have to copy and paste that. So let's see. Yeah, I still have the skeleton open. So let's look for drawing the sword, its hand sword socket. So what I like to do is just literally copy and paste so that we can't make any mistakes. So I've got the name here, and I'm going to hit Control-C or Command-C if you're on a Macintosh. And back in the character blueprint, I'm going to paste it in here where it says none. And make sure that you don't enter any extra spaces or anything like that. One more thing, you're going to want to set the location rule from keep relative instead to this option, snap to target, in all three of these drop-downs, snap to target. Let's compile and save this, and let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm playing the game, and I'm going to hit the F key, and that looks pretty good. So now when I press F again, unfortunately, it doesn't go back to where it started, right? What we can do is the exact same technique using the anim montage notify, not the anim notify, but the montage notify for putting the blade away. So let's go back to the character blueprint. And what I could do is I could just duplicate this. I'll just put it here for now, and then we'll make some room later. Okay, so on notify begin, I'm going to connect the execution wire to attach component to component. The sword is still the target. The skeletal mesh for the character is still the parent. But now I need the other socket, which we made on the skeleton, and that is on the belt, sword belt socket. I'll click on that, and I'm going to Control-C and copy the name. And we are going to go back to the character blueprint, and we are going to we're going to replace this because you can see they're the same. That's why the blade remained in Aridel's hand, okay? So let's delete that, and let's paste what I just copied, okay? And this too has to be set to snap to target in all three of these drop-downs. Okay, so can I make this look any better? Maybe. Just got to make some room. You know, the on notify begin from the play montage node is just in a slightly inconvenient location, but it's not a big deal at all, not to me. We all want our blueprints to look really nice, but, you know, these things happen. Okay, so right now we should be able to do all of those things. So we are unarmed, although the sword is ready to be drawn. And if I go into fighting mode, first thing is that the sword is unsheathed. And now I can even fight with it because it is attached to that socket and following the transform. So it doesn't matter which attack I do. And I've got these randomized. And then when I'm done fighting, of course, I can just put it away and then just continue along my journey. Okay? So we'll run around here and have some fun and pretend we have enemies. Oh, I encountered an enemy, so I better get ready to fight. And now I can fight all I want. Okay. And after I've defeated my adversary, we can resheath this. Of course, all of this can be accompanied by sound effects. And that is, in fact, what I think you should do next. Um, Not only that, I want to also do part 3 in this series to talk about how to attach particle systems to sockets on a mesh. In another project, I have Aradel set up to cast magic spells, and I used sockets on Aradel's hands to sort of spawn these magic orbs, and it looks fantastic. So we want to be able to do that. And we can even add sockets to static meshes if we want to spawn particle trails for when this sword is being swung. So that will be in part 3 of this mini-series as well, okay? So I think this looks terrific. And I thank you once again for sticking with me through this tutorial. If anybody wants to have a closer look at any of the blueprints, just please let me know, and I will post them for you. Okay, thanks again, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.